Welcome to the Count Macula Show. I am Count Macula. Today I was reading an article in a newspaper about grunge rock turning 20 years old. See that? Grunge rock turns 20 with Eddie Vedder about 20 years ago. So this article inspired me to want to pay tribute to grunge rock. I believe at the time it was a great phenomenon to come out of the Pacific Northwest and the Washington area, based in Seattle, Washington, but they were from various parts of the state of Washington. But it's considered to be music that came from Seattle. It was a great time back then. It was great music coming out. It was great bands, but it is going to be known for mostly 4 bands. Even though there were a lot of other bands that came before them and came after them and came during. But the 4 bands are Alice in Chains, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and Soundgarden. Those are the 4 bands, the 4 biggest bands that come out of Seattle during that scene 20 years ago, known as grunge rock, and then later named alternative music. But it was a great time back then. I really liked the music, even though a lot of music writers started to make fun of it after a while. Sometimes I believe, in my opinion, that a lot of these writers, these music writers, feel the need to bash things because it just makes for interesting writing. If they say they like everything, then doesn't make it interesting, so they give some type of resistance to it, even if it's good. So a lot of the time when the bands first came out, they were for it. Maybe a year or 2 into it, they started to bash it and said, you know, this music is not alternative, it's not, what is it alternative to, which they have points to, but at the end of the day, good music is good music. And that time of grunge rock, even though it got made fun of towards the middle and the end of it, it was still good music. What happened, how it died, is that same reason, that it became oversaturated, and it was supposed to be alternative, meaning alternative to the glam rock that was the head of rock music at that time. So it became the alternative to that, where everything was, the imagery was stripped down, and that's where the flannel shirts and the jeans with the holes in it and the Chuck Taylor Converse shoe wearing image came from. So that alternative became popular. So then it became what was known as the alternative lie. So it's why a lot of the critics jumped on it. But still, at the end of the day, great music came out of it. Unfortunately, it died a slow death because after those 4 bands, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and Soundgarden, you had a lot of second tier or B-rate or C-rate or D-rate bands. Like you had Bush come out afterwards. You had a band called Sponge, a band called Collective Soul, a band called Candlebox, a band called Silverchair, and I can go on and on and on. And those bands were kind of like just carbon copies. I saw an interview with one of the members of the band Collective Soul. They had a hit in '94. I think it was called Shine. Yeah, the song was Shine, and it was a really big hit. And he did an interview years later, and he said the record company just handed him and his band like flannel shirts. So it goes to show you where their head was at, where they were just trying to recreate a falsified image. And that's why those bands like Collective Soul and Silverchair, they're not legendary, because they were just carbon copies. You know, a band like Bush came out and they just became like top 40, and then they fizzled out. So I can go on and on, but this is more of a tribute to the 4 main bands, and I'll start out with Nirvana. This album came out in '91, 20 years ago. This is their album Nevermind. This is their 2nd album. They had a really good album called Bleach that was before this, and it was really good. It was very lo-fi, and it was very like low budget, but it's still, Bleach is still a great album. But this is I'm doing a grunge rock tribute, so I'm not going to go through all the old stuff. I'll just keep it to the 4 main albums that really solidified the world of grunge, and this obviously is one of the biggest ones. You had Smells Like Teen Spirit, which all these are classic songs, and that was more of their pop song. This album is the only one that's fully polished out of Nirvana. The one Bleach before this was very lo-fi, and the one after this, In Utero, was more trying to recreate the style of Bleach, where it was just everything wasn't overproduced or production-wise. So, but this album, even though Kurt Cobain, you know, he had a lot of self-hatred, and he hated the fact that he was a star, and he hated the fact that all this album was very packaged and polished. It actually has a lot of good. It actually stands out on its own, because especially if you listen to the first half of this album, it's very radio, like In Bloom and Come As You Are and Lithium, which is also my favorite song is Lithium off the album. It's very radio friendly. The second half is, you can see Kurt Cobain as a writer, where he expressed himself a lot, and you could tell he was a very tortured soul. He was a tortured individual. So the second half of the album, like Stay Away and Something in the Way and Drain You, all these are about his pain, his personal pain. So his pain, a lot of his hurt came out in his songs. So the second half of the album, you can feel that depressive type of vibe he was on. But this is why it made it a classic. You know, unfortunately, he committed suicide in '94. And when you think about it, that grunge era, the Nirvana era, was only 3 years old. It started out in '91 with this album, and it ended in '94. So it wasn't that long. 3 years is a very short amount of time for a music scene to come out with such greatness. But that's what usually happens. It's very short, but it seems like it lasts forever, because it lasts so many years afterwards, where it seems like it was forever. But this is Nirvana's Nevermind album, 20 years old, and the songs are really good. It's still deep. Like I said, it's very highly polished for Nirvana's sound, but this is what made them famous. This is the album that made them legends, and it's a great album. So that's Nevermind. The second album I'm going to do my little tribute to is Pearl Jam 10. And I think they just released it, or they're just about to release the 20th anniversary of this album called Pearl Jam 20. But this is the original Pearl Jam 10. This is actually not my favorite album of Pearl Jam. I like the next one after this, Versus, with the sheep on the cover. That's my actual favorite album. But this is the album that put them on the map, and it's pretty good. They have a lot of their radio hits like Even Flow and Alive, and of course the biggest one, Jeremy, which had a big. This album came out in the height of MTV's video playing, when MTV would just play videos 90% of the time, which obviously they don't now. But Jeremy was one of the biggest music videos of the year. I think that's what really put them on the map, because it's about a kid, you know, going to a high school, a bullied kid going to a high school and killing his classmates. So it was a hot topic at the time, and the video was big. So, like I said, this is not my favorite, even though it's a great, all these albums I'm doing are great albums, because they became classic. But Versus is my favorite album. This is still good, though. Jeremy and Even Flow and Alive, they're all great songs. Unfortunately, they don't make albums like this anymore. At the time when this album was out, you never thought there would be a time when bands don't put out solid albums anymore, where we would have technology where you just download a song and nobody has to make albums anymore. But when you listen to albums like this and Nevermind, you realize how rare, or how much of a little time capsule they are, where they actually are pretty strong compared to what's out now. I mean, extremely strong. Maybe if the critics knew that this would be rare, they wouldn't have bashed it so much during the later half of the grunge era.